Molly is the convener for the Socialist Alternative National Women's Caucus. Her articles have appeared in Justice newspaper, which you can buy at the back there, and on the Socialist Alternative website. She has also played an important role in developing our organization's approach to women's struggles.
Hi. Both of the presidential election campaigns have increasingly centered on winning women's votes, especially in the final lead up to November 6th. Women are more likely to vote than men. In 2008, women made up 60% of all voters. With the close race, Romney and Obama are frantically trying to secure support from women, and the polls are really tight. 1 month ago, Obama had a 16-point lead on Romney for women's support. Just this week, the Associated Press reported that the two are literally neck and neck among women, with the gap completely closed and both candidates at 47%. Ads focusing on women voters have skyrocketed. The media is constantly reporting on which candidate women are preferring at the moment. CNN posted a widely criticized article this week suggesting that perhaps women's votes depend on their hormone levels. That while both candidates are handsome, they're both potential providers for women. When women are ovulating, they might just find liberalism sexier. Mitt Romney has begun producing ads with women saying, you know, I heard that Mitt Romney is against birth control, but I Googled it and that's just not true. He cares about us. He's a great boss for women. And just to contrast with 3 weeks ago, the first presidential debate focused on domestic policy. Women's issues got no mention by either candidate. And now suddenly birth control and pay equity have become key questions of the election. But let's be honest, these are basic rights that for most Americans, and certainly most women, stopped being controversial decades ago. Listening to the debates and campaign coverage, you get no real sense of the crisis that working class women are living in. Nearly 5.5 million women are unemployed in the U.S. A record of almost 26 million women are living in poverty. More than 40% of single mothers are now in poverty, and a record number of women live in extreme poverty, earning less than half the poverty line. 1 in 5 women have no form of health insurance at all. These problems cannot be fixed through Romney's binders of women. Obama pointed out correctly that no matter what rhetoric Mitt Romney uses in the final moments of his campaign, he still plans and promises to shut down Planned Parenthood to the full extent of his power. Women's health clinics around the country rely on federal funding for family planning. Now that's a serious threat to women's lives and their economic survival. Texas, with a notoriously Republican-dominated state government, already in the last year has unleashed unprecedented attacks on women's health care services. An observer review of state records has found that 146 clinics have lost state funds. More than 60 of those clinics have closed their doors forever. The number of organizations that help poor women plan pregnancy has shrunk by almost half. Planned Parenthood has become a buzzword for anti-choice Republicans who set out to equate women's clinics with murder and moral outrage. However, the real outrage is through overarching, politically motivated attacks on women's health care providers that leave low-income women with no affordable contraceptive options, no STI tests, no regular cancer screenings, and no control over their reproductive health. Planned Parenthood once had broad bipartisan backing. In 1964, Dwight Eisenhower and Harry Truman served as honorary co-chairs. Even as the abortion wars raged on, its other reproductive health care services, which make up the vast majority of its work, remained largely uncontroversial. Now any and all reproductive health care services are being demonized by the right wing. But I'd also point out that under the Obama administration, Planned Parenthood is struggling to exist as it is. The reality is you don't have to look far to see that women's lives are already under an unprecedented level of attack. In 2011 alone, individual states enacted 92 new laws restricting access to abortion services, largely through attacking reproductive health care facilities. There are currently less than half as many safe abortion providers as there was in 1982. In 97% of all counties outside of major metro areas, there are no abortion providers at all. Additionally, prohibitions on insurance coverage of abortion procedures have made it infinitely more difficult for working class women to have access to the reproductive health care services that they need. Obama's main appeal to women, to many, right now seems to reduce to, I'm not a Republican, and that's not enough. Over the last 4 years, everywhere that the Democrats have been in power, at federal, state, local levels, they're carrying out brutal budget cuts on vital social programs like health care, child care, housing subsidies, and welfare. All of these especially impact women and mothers. Rhetoric aside, women's rights and conditions are being pushed backwards by both corporate political parties. As a result of both parties rolling back women's rights, a deep poverty crisis for single mothers, unwanted teen pregnancies, economic dependence with abuse and violence, children growing up in terrible conditions, and a general immiseration and lack of control of their lives for tens of millions of working-class women. The Democrats offer up rhetorical defenses for women's rights, and only when it helps them get to women's votes. Most of the time, they stand aside as a Republican rampage against women rolls on. But what are we supposed to do about it? How do we fight back? If you look at the majority of mainstream women's organizations, the solution is to vote Democrat, to donate to their organizations so that they can donate to the Democrats. I think we can say the solution has failed to do anything but provide Band-Aids, and to allow our rights to be rolled back a little bit slower by the Democratic Party. The Democrats are a capitalist party, funded and controlled by big business. At their top levels, they only support women's rights to the extent that they think it's necessary to get women's votes and to keep them in power. Achieving genuine equality for women, like equal pay, maternity rights, affordable family planning, can only be achieved by making big business pay, and they're fiercely opposed to cuts into their profit. When the mainstream women's groups refuse to expose the Democrats' broad, anti-worker, anti-women agenda, when these groups work so hard to deliver women to this lesser evil party, then the corporate politicians at the head of the Democrats feel zero pressure to actually improve women's lives. All they have to do is be slightly less terrible than the Republicans. But the way we've made the progress that both political parties are cutting further and further back is through building independent movements. A real women's movement has to be independent of both corporate political parties to succeed. Our starting point is not what is acceptable to the Democratic Party, which is really the same as saying what is acceptable to corporate America. Instead, our starting point must be what do women actually need to transform their lives to achieve real equality, real economic independence. We need a movement that will boldly and unapologetically fight for free, safe, accessible birth control, reproductive health care, and abortion services for all, fully subsidized high-quality childcare, fully funded maternity leave with the legal right to return to your previous employment with no loss in pay, benefits, or seniority. Women still make 77 cents to a man's dollar. We must demand equal pay for equal work. A real program to fight violence against women, including fully funded quality domestic violence shelters and counseling services, and a guaranteed minimum income to ensure that all women are economically independent. Because of their ties to the Democratic Party, mainstream women's groups have only put up a defensive strategy. They have not proactively fought for expanding women's rights in decades. This has allowed the right wing to define the debate and to steadily roll back women's rights and social attitudes towards women's rights. But we must fight back through movements, which have infinitely higher success rates than begging corporate politicians to throw us scraps, and by building a political alternative so the Democrats can't take our votes for granted anymore. It's not enough to threaten to withhold their votes every few years in order to get Band-Aid reforms. Reforms are not enough. We need to build a movement that is prepared to reach out in solidarity with other social movements on an independent working class program. Through this, we build serious resistance to capitalism's divide and conquer strategy, putting an end to the varying levels of inequality to subordinate us based on race, class, immigrant status, gender identity, sexuality, disability, etc. Socialist Alternative is calling for a vote for Jill Stein this election. And we campaign for building a real left political alternative, which can unite all social movements together into a common front against the two corporate political parties. Women's lives depend on it.